Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sent a letter letting President Joe Biden know that he is going to ignore the Supreme Court order that gave federal authorities the right to cut the barbed wire at the border that was intervening in the federal authorities' ability, the Border Patrol ability to access migrants and people crossing the border. That was the nature of the Supreme Court decision. Greg Abbott sent a letter outlining his legal and moral justification for ignoring the order from President Joe Biden. There are these little moments in history that could seem rather innocuous, but what Greg Abbott has done is laid the legal groundwork for a confrontation between the state of Texas and its National Guard and federal authorities. You have voices on both sides of the equation now calling for what would be tantamount to a confrontation. Now, let's be clear. When I say confrontation in this regard, we are speaking of kinetic action. We're speaking of the very real possibility of the inflamed emotions of this situation at the border, as inflamed by Greg Abbott, who had every intention of inflaming the situation even more because it helps Greg Abbott score political points. It helps him force a constitutional crisis. It helps him posture as if he is the hero of the story, and Texas is a victim of the big bad wolf of the federal government who isn't protecting them from this immigration crisis. And I put that in quotations because, well, there's a good argument against whether or not Greg Abbott's legal justification, considering this an invasion, is even viable. Okay, so the underlying arguments from Greg Abbott, they are fallacious, to be certain. He presents this as a false dichotomy between the federal government either doing what he says at the border, right, or that represents an abandonment of the state of Texas. So he creates this false dichotomy through the entire. So these are things that we expect from conservatives, from Republicans. We expect this disingenuous argument, this disingenuous logic, and this disingenuous framing. Here's the thing, folks. We've been so used to them doing this over the years that we don't see the inflection point. Right now, a governor of one of the largest states in the union with the history of secession has now laid the legal and moral justification, albeit I want to be clear. What he has in the letter is neither logically consistent nor is it morally consistent, and it's not constitutionally consistent. Here's the problem, folks. They're using this to hype themselves up into actual conflict. David, pull up on the screen some of the tweets from some of the conservative, not just commentators, but major influencers. If you could take me down or minimize me, because you know my eyes are getting. I need you to make that bigger. All right, here's End Wokeness, one of the most popular conservative accounts on Twitter or on X, and one of the most racist, according to another AI analysis, but we'll get to that another time, another day. This is what he said. The standoff with the Texas National Guard might deal the final and fatal blow to the Biden White House. It's a lose-lose. Either they send troops down to fight and physically remove the barriers and wires, or they let Texas continue to provide the public with visuals of what actual border security and enforcement looks like. Okay, that's just proposition number one. Here's Greg Abbott. And I bring up this tweet because I want you to look at who's seconding and giving him a pat on the back, giving him an amen, none other than Elon Musk. Greg Abbott said that Texas National Guard continues to hold the line in Eagle Pass. Go back a little bit for me, David. Texas will not back down from our efforts to secure the border in Biden's absence. Elon Musk promoted this and propped it up by simply saying, good. You know, this is his insightful reflection on the matter, but to further inflame. Here's another quote from In Wokeness. The United States has 72 million gun owners and 25 million AR-15 owners. We are the largest de facto army on earth. If the federal government wants to come to Texas, they'll have to get through all 72 million of us. All these white folks are ready for a second civil war. They're hyping themselves up into it, ladies and gentlemen, gender nonconforming individuals. Here's DC Draino. Now, pause it real quick, because what's funny about DC Draino, if you could look, he's ginger. Ginger's totally cool. I'm still waiting on a ginger Doctor Who. So there's nothing against gingers. But turns out he's Irish and Jewish. Totally cool. Probably a dope combination. But for conservatives, DC Draino is not white enough. I always bring this up whenever I deal with this guy on Twitter, because it's funny. In his mentions are always some anti-Semitic, racist, neo-Nazi who's reminding him that while DC Draino, while you are white passing and racist, you're not white enough for the Nazis who want to come after you too. But I digress. That's not the point. Here he is, inflaming the tensions of a second civil war, saying, I am hugely supportive of Texas Governor Abbott engaging in his fight against the Biden regime to protect our border. My only question is, why didn't he militarize the border from day one? Better late than never, I guess. Keep going. Here we go. Keep going. The more, or is that might be the last one. Nope. Here's the one. You might have to zoom in. Not to mention Tim's Civil War Pool, who has spent the better part of the last 3 years promoting the idea of a second civil war. Now, normally you could ignore these clowns off of social media. However, we're talking about accounts with the assistance of Elon Musk that speak to the tune of tens of millions of views every single tweet. Not every single day, every tweet. We're talking about a media infrastructure that is a hermetically sealed bubble. Why does that matter? Because as your old uncles sit there and watch Fox News and Newsmax and all the other channels that came out of this period, Daily Wire, Tucker Carlson on X, as they watch these platforms, they're getting fed the exact red meat, along with now Greg Abbott's legal justification, moral justification, constitutional justification, and what he considers to be a logical justification for defying the Supreme Court's order. And now everyone is using that to inflame the flames, fan the flames, I'll get it right eventually, of a second civil war. I am not one who deals in hyperbole, right? But what would make us think in the United States that we would not experience the same level of violence that we have exported abroad that's currently happening right now, right? What would make, so we have war in Yemen that's been going on long before the Houthi rebels stepped in to do something on behalf of the Palestinian people. The civil war in Yemen, they've been starving the children of Yemen for a very long time. What makes us think that that kind of violence can't come to the United States? Syria's civil war has been going on, what, 8-9 years now? Somebody correct me, right? Violence that is happening on the world stage. What makes us think it can't come here, right? Syria, Yemen, Ukraine. God knows we see the violence that's happening in Palestine, right? Sudan, Congo. We look at the violence that's happening around the world. What would make us so comfortable to sit back and think that it couldn't happen here when you've got these rabid Jim Crow? Let me catch myself. I haven't justified the reason for which I'm going to call them Jim Crow crackers. That's another video. But when you consider what these neo-Confederates, these lost causers, these white grievance, white replacement theory Nazis are saying, promoting, and inflaming, and you juxtapose that with Greg Abbott, who has made it clear that he wants to build his entire career off of how cruel he can be to immigrants and to how big of a constitutional crisis he can cause for the United States of America. What makes us believe that they're not serious when they're calling for a second civil war? What makes us believe? Oh, not to mention the religious justification. Everywhere I've turned today, I have seen people from the Southern Baptist Convention, because the SBC is in convention right now, right? That's that convention that has, I believe, either 600 or 900. I know that's a big gap, but I can't remember if it's 600 allegations and cases of sexual assault or if it's 900 allegations of sexual. I can't remember which one, but that Southern Baptist Church is meeting this week, and I have seen Southern Baptist white Christian pastor after Southern Baptist white Christian pastor call for confrontation between the Texas National Guard and the federal government. So, folks, they've got a legal justification that doesn't stand the test, but that doesn't matter, right? By the time we go through the legal process of evaluating Greg Abbott's letter and the constitutional crisis that it creates, whether or not his legal argument is logical, he knows that's immaterial. But they have a legal argument, they have a constitutionally framed argument, they have a morally framed argument, right? And they even have a spiritual, religious community that's from these Christian nationalist white evangelicals who are also faming the flans. These preachers are faming the flans, a fan of civil war. Something about that particular phrase, it's kind of hard for me. Fanning the flames. I'm joking about it. I'm laughing. I'm being, tongue in cheek because, otherwise I would sound like Alex Jones over here, except I'd be accurate, right? I don't think that we can downplay them when they are seriously saying these things and they are incrementally moving us closer and closer to confrontation. And now the question becomes, well, President Biden can simply federalize the National Guard of Texas. Sure, he can. But then that becomes a question of where do the loyalties of the leadership of the National Guard of Texas lie? The questions themselves become problematic. The position that Greg Abbott is putting the country is beyond problematic, but it's intentional. And it's intentional for political posturing. It's a political power play. He's attempting to weaken Joe Biden as if Joe Biden needed help weakening himself. It's all in favor of using immigrants as a way of, quite honestly, destroying America, because that's the only outcome. As one of those tweets said, it's a lose-lose situation, and Greg Abbott was fully aware of that.